Hello, everybody. Welcome to Voices Big and Small. And on this, um, and just a reminder, these will now be done as regular features. I'm no longer going to be premiering these, so um, they'll be regular videos. First off, but anyways, with that being said, let's get going here. On today's episode of Voices Big and Small, I'll be highlighting the voice roles of Dallas based voice actor Kent Williams, known, of course, for his roles including George Sautome from Yu Hakusho, Mercenary Tao and Dr. Gero from the Dragon Ball franchise. Um, you've heard him in a number of narrations as well. So, without no further ado, let's take a look at Mr. Kent Williams from the Dallas area. So, here's a little bit of the background here. Kent Williams is an American voice actor who works for English versions of Japanese anime series at Funimation Okatron 5000. He is known as the voice of Dr. Gero, Mercenary Tao, Supreme Kai, and Old Kai from the Dragon Ball franchise. So yeah, I forgot about his roles as a Kai. Father in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. As I recall, that was, I think, the role he took over from, may have taken over from Scott McNeil, who did it in the first Fullmetal Alchemist series, and Judge from Ace Attorney, and Hattori Soma from the original Fruits Basket series, as well as the 2013 reboot. A little, he was born, of course, October 11, 1964, which would make him 55. Another little interesting little tidbit that I found here was Kent's son Adam actually voiced at Funimation as a child actor under the alias Avery Rice Williams. So if any of you remember some of the earlier works like Yu Yu Hakusho or earlier days on Full Metal Alchemist, um, Adam under the alias Avery Rice Williams would also do some voice acting there. So, um, so with that then, so now with a lot of that little intro out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at some of his. First off, we're going to just breeze through some of his narration roles. These are some of the shows that he, of course, lent his voice on as narrator. They would include, of course, Yu Yu Hakusho. Many of you probably remember hearing his voice, for the teasers and all that. Um, Full Metal, a lot of the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, the show itself, the 4-panel comic theater, and the OVA collection, Dragon Age, Dawn of the Seeker, Senran Kagura, Ninja Slayer, Show by Rock, Dimension W, Monster Hunter Stories Right On, Samurai Warriors Legend of Sanada, and Samurai Warriors. These are all the shows that he lent his voice for in terms of for narration. Now, now let's get into the roles he's done as a voice actor. Of course, from the Dragon Ball series, which Funimation did the dubbing for in 2003. For the first series, just simply Dragon Ball, he was, of course, the voice of Mercenary Tao and Obachamon. Then in Dragon Ball Z, he would, of course, provide the English voices for Supreme Kai, Old Supreme Kai, Kibito Kai, as well as Dr. Gero Android 20. Of course, he would reprise his role as Mercenary Tao, as well as providing the voices of Moraiko and King Moai. So quite a few roles, which is somewhat unusual. Just somewhat unusual for animes here in America, usually one person each does the voice, but obviously they did do some ensemble work here. But of course, now granted, some of these characters were at different time periods too during the series. So in Funimation's dub of Yu Yu Hakusho: The Golden Seal, of course, he would. Now, from what I understand, I think they did the redub more recently. Because I don't think they initially were the Funimation did not initially have the movies. I think the Golden Seal was one of the movies. In that, he would of course provide the English voice of George Satomi throughout the Yu Yu Hakusho dub for Funimation. Kent Williams would provide the voice of George Satomi, basically the blue ogre whipping boy of Prince Koenma. In the Dragon Ball movie, Dragon Ball Mystical Adventure, he would, of course, reprise his role as English voice of Mercenary Tao. In the movie Dragon Ball Z Lord Slug, he would he would provide the English voice of Metamacha. In the Funimation dub of the Escaflowne movie, he would provide the voice of Goar Fennel. And of course, in the Yu Yu Hakusho TV series itself, that's where he first started playing the role of George Satomi. He was also Chu, the demon Chu, basically the Suiken master. Suiken meaning drunken fist. In 2002, he would be cast as the English voice of Hattori Soma. Also in 2002, in the Dragon Ball Z Budokai video game, he would of course reprise his role as Dr. Gero Android 20. Move on to 2003 in Dragon Ball Z Broly the Legendary Super Saiyan. He would be casting the voice of Krang. Then in Dragon Ball Z Super Android 13 movie, he would be cast as the English voice of. He would reprise his role as the English voice Dr. Gero Android 20. Then in Dragon Ball GT, he would reprise his roles as Kibito Kai, Old Supreme Kai, Dr. Gero, Android 20, and Supreme Kai. Now, get that. Oftentimes, for those of you who've ever seen, Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball GT, oftentimes you see these Kais all Kibito Kai, Supreme Kai, and Old Supreme Kai all together. This is one voice actor basically talking to himself in the different voices. So that's got to be an experience right there. And in 2003, in Lupin the Third: Voyage to Danger, he would be cast as the English voice of John Kloss. In Funimation's dub of Initial D, First Stage, he would be cast as Bunta Fujiwara, which I believe is the main character's father, as I recall, because when I watched it a few years ago. Then in the Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2 video game, he would reprise his roles as Supreme Kai, Dr. Gero, Android 20, and Kibito Kai. Then in 2004, this is another one of those situations where an anime voice actor actually played different characters, but they were for different episodes, obviously, because this is from Funimation's dub of Case Closed, which is more of an episodic, one of the few episodic animes you'll find out there. And among the voice roles he would do in Case Closed would include providing the English voices of Detective Magnum, Captain Bernie Biggers, Man with the Laptop on the Bullet Train, Thomas McMullins, Bert Barnes, Barnaby, Horace Hennegraaff, Eddie Crockerly, Troy Haysom, Norman Dean, and Sebastian Leclerc. And as we move on, as we move a little further ahead into 2004, he would reprise his role as Dr. Gero Android 20 in the Dragon Ball Z Supersonic Warriors video game. And in 2004, when Funimation got the dubbing rights to One Piece, among the credits you would have in One Piece, you'd provide the English voices for the Funimation dub of the characters, including Kuro, Clahodore, Shura, Professor Clover, Fossa, Raoul, and Scorpion. Then he would, of course, reprise his role as Chu in the Yu Yu Hakusho Dark Tournament video game, providing the English voice. Then in in the first Full Metal Alchemist series, so the earlier series, he would be cast as the English voice of Majahal. Then in the Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3 video game in 2004, he would reprise his roles as Dr. Gero Android 20 and the three Kais previously mentioned, Supreme Kai, Kibito Kai, and Old Supreme Kai. He would then in 2005, he would reprise his role as Bunta Fujiwara in Initial D's second stage, providing the English voice of that character. Then in the Dragon Ball Z Sagas video game, he would reprise his role as Dr. Gero Android 20. Then in Lupin the Third, Island of Assassins, he would provide the voice of Doc. Then in Lupin the Third, Crisis in Tokyo, he would provide the English voice of Michael Suzuki. We move ahead to then also further in 2005 in Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi video game, he would of course reprise his roles as English voices of Dr. Gero, Android 20, Mercenary Tao, and also provide the English voice for Jamemba. In 2006, he would be cast as the English voice of Constable in Desert Punk. Also in 2006, in the Dragon Ball Z Fusion Reborn movie, he would be cast as, I guess he would actually reprise his role as the English voice of Jamemba. And then in Speed Grapher, he would be cast as the English voice of Genba Ryogoku. Then in Trinity Blood, he would be cast as the English voice of Count Gyula Kadar. Then in the anime movie Origin Spirits of the Past, he'd be cast as the English voice of Dr. Sakul. In the movie Case Closed, the time bombed skyscraper, he would be cast as the English voice of Professor Leo Joel. Now, mind you, oftentimes, of course, Kent a lot of times seems to get cast in a lot of like older characters, like middle aged to older characters. Guy's probably in that like 45 to 60 range, or 50 to 60 range. Um, they had a few guys like that. He was one of them. Also in 2006, in Moonface, he would be cast as the English voice of Koichiro Mito. Then in the Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 video game in 2006, he would reprise his role in a number of characters, including Dr. Gero, Android 20, Mercenary Tao, Supreme Kai, Kibito Kai, and Jamemba. Also in 2006, in Black Cat, he would be cast as the English voice of Chardin Flamberg. Okay, now starting in 2007 here, of course, I'm going to assume that the first word here is pronounced B. It's spelled capital B, um, apostrophe T. So I'm gonna assume that that's Beat X is what they're talking about there. In the anime Beat X, he would be cast as the English voice of Fao Lafine. Then in Dragon Ball Z Shin Budokai, another road video game, he would reprise his roles as Supreme Kai and Janemba. And in Mushishi, he would be cast as the English voice of Jin. In School Rumble, he'd be cast as English voices of Hayato Tani, Mongoku, and Nakamura. In Witchblade, he'd be cast as the English voice of Masaya Wado. In Glass Fleet, he'd be cast as the English voice of Kaz. In Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3 video game, he would once again reprise a number of the roles he was known for, including Dr. Gero, Android 20, Mercenary Tao, Janemba, Kibito Kai, and Supreme Kai. And in the One Piece Unlimited, and then in 2008, in the One Piece Unlimited Adventure video game, he'd be cast as the English voice of Spandam. In Black Blood Brothers, he'd be cast as the English voice of Johan Sang. In the anime movie Vexile, he'd be cast as the English voice of Itakura. In Funimation's dub of Evangelion 1.0, You Are Not Alone. In that movie, he would be cast as the English voice of Kozo Fuyutsuki. In School Rumble Extra Class in 2008, he would reprise his role as Hayato Tani. I believe that might have been their teacher, I'm guessing, if I remember correctly. In Ghost Hunt, he would be casting his voice of Ohashi. In School Rumble Second Semester, he would reprise his roles as Nakamura and Hayato Tani. In Ouran High School Host Club, he would be cast as Yoshio Otori, which I believe was the father of the glasses of J. Michael Tatum's character in Ouran High School Host Club. Um, in Darker Than Black, he was cast as the English voice of Mao, the cat. And Save Me, and now as we get into 2009 here, and Save Me Lollipop, he was cast. It was cast as the English voice of one of the teachers. In Strain Strategic Armored Infantry, he was cast as the English voice of Dufarge. In Shigurui Death Frenzy, he'd be cast as the English voice of Sanjuro Okitsu. Yeah, Shigurui is a pretty gruesome one, you guys. If you're into that kind of thing, you might want to check it out. In The Gray Man, he would be cast the English voice of Jake Russell. In Romeo and Juliet, Romeo X Juliet, he would be casting his voice of Lancelot. In Bacano, he would be cast as the English voice of Gustave Saint Germain. In Kaze no Stigma, he was cast as the English voice of Masayuki Ogami. In Gunslinger Girl Il Teatrino, he'd be cast the English voice of Alessio. Gunslinger Girl was pretty cool too. Kind of, girls with guns kind of anime with some cool music um, with it as well. In the comedic anime Sergeant Frog, he was cast as English voice of Paul Moriyama, the butler of one of the characters, I believe. In Nabari no O, he was cast in English voice of Hattori Tojuro. He would reprise his role as Mercenary Tao in the video game Dragon Ball Revenge of King Piccolo. In Kenichi, the Mightiest Disciple, he would be cast as the English voice of Akasame Koetsuji, who was basically the judo master of the dojo. If for those of you who may have seen Kenichi before, basically it's about a guy who goes in to learn martial arts, and the studio he goes to has multiple disciplines within that dojo, and can't voice the character who was the judo master. So interesting tidbit there. As we continue on here, in the animes, the Tower of Druaga, the Aegis of Uruk, the Quest of Jil, and the Tower of Druaga, the Aegis of Uruk. He'd be cast as the English voice of Utu in both of those. He would then, of course, reprise his role as Dr. Gero Android 20 in the Dragon Ball Raging Blast video game. In El Cazador de la Bruja, which is translated from Spanish to English as the Witch Hunter, he'd be cast as English voices of Roberto and Webster. Then in Bamboo Blade, he would be cast as English voice of the director. In Spice and Wolf, he'd be cast as the English voice of Lemurio. In Case Closed, Captured in Her Eyes movie, he would be cast as the English voice of Superintendent Osterman. And then as we move into 2010 here, in Rin, Daughters of Mnemosyne, he would be cast English voice of the Professor. In Line Barrels of Iron, he'd be cast as the English voice of Dmitry Magarov. So getting to play a bit of a Russian there. In Sands of Destruction, he would be cast as the English voice of the Warden. In Soul Eater, he would be cast as the English voice of Sid Barrett. Then in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, he would be cast as the English voice of Father, which, as I mentioned earlier, was, I believe, a role he took over from Scott McNeil did Father and Hohenheim, Elric in the first Full Metal Alchemist anime, and then Kent Williams, I believe, took over those roles here in later on the latter part of the early 2010s. In the Tower of Druaga, the Sword of Uruk, he would reprise his role as Utu. He would then reprise his role as the English voice of Bunta Fujiwara in Initial D Third Stage. And in Dragon Ball Kai, he would, of course, once again come back and reprise his roles as Dr. Gero Android 20 and the three Kais, Supreme Kai, Old Supreme Kai, and Kabuto Kai. In Dragon Ball Origins 2 video game, he would reprise his role as Mercenary Tao. In Casshern Sins, he would be cast as the English voice of Mars. In Hetalia Axis Powers, he'd be cast as the English voice of Napoleon. In Corpse Princess, he would provide the English voice of Shogun Takamine. In Sengoku Basara Samurai Kings, he would be cast the English voice of Matsunaga Hisahide. In Eden of the East, he would provide the English voice of Hajime Hiura. He would once again reprise his role as Dr. Gero Android 20 in Dragon Ball Z Tenkaichi Tag Team 2010. Also in 2010, on O Edo Rocket, he would provide the voice of Masakichi. Also in 2010, in Dragon Ball Raging Blast 2 video game, he would reprise his roles as Dr. Gero Android 20 in Jamemba. And as we move into 2011, in Black Butler, he would provide the English voice of Henry Barrymore. In Phantom Requiem for the Phantom, he would provide the English voice of Scythe Master. He would reprise his role as Kozo Fuyutsuki in the 2011 in the anime movie Evangelion 2.0. You cannot advance. That's of course Funimation's dub of that. In The Sacred Blacksmith, he would be casting his voice of the Bandit Leader. In Hero Tales, he would be casting his voice of Korin. In Ga-Ray Zero, now all these are in 2011. That's like 9 years ago that they were doing these dubs. Some of these ones I'm talking about right now. That's pretty interesting. In Ga-Ray Zero, he would be casting his voice of Naraku Isayama. In Ride Back, he would provide the English voice of Suzuki. In the Funimation dub of the anime movie Trigun Badlands Rumble dub, he would be cast as the English voice of Kane/Kepler. In Baka and Test Summon the Beast, he would be cast as the English voice of Soichi Nishimura. For those of you who don't know what the word Baka means, that's the Japanese word for idiot. Interesting. In Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Tenkaichi, he would provide the English voices of Dr. Gero Android 20. Well, of course, he reprised some of these roles. Jamemba and Old Supreme Kai and Supreme Kai, as well as providing the English voice of Janempa. So Janemba and Janempa. In Fairy Tail, there's another one of his relatively famous roles. He would provide the English voice for the Lamia Scale wizard Jura Nekis. As I mentioned during last week's premiere, depending upon the number of credits, how long the video will take here. Now as we get into 2012 here in Hetalia World Series, he would be casting his voice of Turkey. In Sengoku Basara Samurai Kings 2, he would reprise his role as the English voice of Matsunaga Hisahide. In Okame-san and Her Seven Companions, he would provide the English voice of Harmel. In the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood 4-panel comic theater short, he would provide the English voice of Father. In Shiki, he would provide the English voice of Koike Masaharu. And, that's the one I was actually thinking of earlier when I was talking about Shigurue. This is actually the one I was actually thinking of, Shiki. In Shangri-La, he would provide the English voice of the lesbian character Momoko. In Freezing, he would provide the English voice of Patriarch. In the King of Thorn movie, he would provide the English voice of Dr. Duncan McNair. In the Borderlands 2's video game, he would provide a few voices, including Corporal Race, Incinerator Clayton, Male Test Subject, and Dwarf. In Steins Gate, he would provide the English voice of Dr. Nakabachi. He would reprise his role as Dr. Gero Android 20 in the Dragon Ball Z for Kinect video game. In the Dead Man Wonderland OVA, he would provide the English voice of Domon. In C, Control the Money of Soul and Possibility, he would provide the English voice of Shimada. In Funimation's dub of Shakugan no Shana 2 Second, he would provide the English voice of Alistair. In A Certain Magical Index, he would provide the English voice of Ao Amai. In Toriko, he would be cast the English voice of Elbow. And now as we move, actually Toriko was dubbed in 2013, by the way. We get into 2013 in Shakugan no Shana, the movie, as well. Let's see. He would reprise his role as Alistair in Shakugan no Shana, the movie, as well as Shakugan no Shana S. He would reprise his role as the English voice of Soichi Nishimura in Baka and Test Summon the Beast 2, as well as the OVA of that series. Kind of a flat-topped, tough-looking teacher type. In the Wolf Children movie, he would provide the English voice of Tendo. He would reprise his role as Alistair in the Shakugan no Shana 3 final anime. Then in the Funimation dub of Eureka 7 AO, short for Astral Origin, he would provide the English voice of Stanley Fry. In Lupin the Third, the woman called Fujiko Mine, in that short anime, he was casting his voice the main Owlman. In a way, he was kind of like the primary antagonist of that series. In the Future Diary, he would be casting his voice of the Doex Machina. In Is This a Zombie of the Dead anime in 2013, he would provide the English voice of Takeshi Kurisu. In Good Luck Girl, he would provide the English voice of Kiku Moshin Suwano. And then as we move into 2014, in Space Dandy, he would provide the English voice of Perry. Some of you probably might remember him on Toonami there. And then in the Evangelion 3.0, you cannot redo. In 2014, he would reprise his role as a much older Kozo Fuyutsuki. And then in the Dragon Ball Z Battle of Z video game, he would reprise his role as Dr. Gero Android 20. Then in your Jormungand Perfect, let's see, in the Jormungand series, in both the first season and the second season Perfect Order, he would be casting his voice of Curry. In Psycho Pass, he would be casting his voice of the Talisman. In the Smite video game, he would be casting his voice of the original Ao Kwang, Sacred Dragon Kukuikan, and SWC 2016 Zeus. In Attack on Titan, he would be cast as the English voice of Ditto Reeves. In Red Data Girl, he would be casting his voice of Takeomi Suzuhara. In A Certain Scientific Railgun S, he would reprise his role as Ao Amai. In Hetalia, The Beautiful World, he would reprise his role as the English voice of Turkey. In the Dragon Ball Z Battle of the Gods movie, he would reprise his roles as Kipido and Old Supreme Kai. In Borderlands, the pre-sequel, he'd be cast as the English voice of Rabbit Adams. In Laughing Under the Clouds, he'd be cast as the English voice of Kiyotsuma Sasaki. Shenmue has been at this for a long time. In Tokyo Ghoul Route A in 2015, he would be casting the voice of Yoshitoki Washu. In Death Parade, he would be casting the voice of Tatsumi. In Assassination Classroom, he would be casting the voice of Lovero. He would reprise his role as Old Supreme Kai in the Dragon Ball Xenoverse video game. In Unbreakable Machine Doll, he'd be casting his voice of Turtle Dove. In Absolute Duo, he would be casting his voice of Equipment Smith. In Yona of the Dawn, he'd be cast his English voice of Son Moon Diok. In Maria the Virgin Witch, he would be casting his voice of Sonunos. In Tokyo Ravens, he would be casting his voice of Daizen Amami. In High School DxD Bjorn, he'd be cast as the English voice of Berkeel. In Blood Blockade Battlefront, he'd be casting as the voice of DJ Fungo. In Nobunagun, he'd be casting the English voice as, I guess, the lead character in it, the Nobunaga Oda. In Show by Rock, he would provide the English voice of Gramps. In The Heroic Legend of Arslan, he would be casting his voice of Carlin. In Free Eternal Summer, he'd be casting his voice of Toto. He would reprise his role as Sid Barrett in Soul Eater Not. In Funimation's dub of Ghost in the Shell, the new movie, he would be casting the voice of Kuwahara. In Snow White with the Red, as we now get into 2016, in Snow White with the red hair, he'd be cast as English voice of King Shenazad. Try saying that one 3 times fast. In Terra in Resonance, he'd be casting his voice of Okano. In Lord Marksman and Vanadis, he would be cast as the English voice of Urzvorn. In Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash, he'd be casting his voice of Honan. In Divine Gate, he would be casting his voice of Gareth. In Rage of Bahamut, he would be casting his voice. In Rage of Bahamut Genesis, he'd be casting his voice of Azazel. In Garo the Animation, he'd be casting his voice of Chamberlain. In My Hero Academia, he'd be casting his voice of Mr. Compress. In Harmony, he'd be casting the voice of Edison Carter. In the anime Gonna Be a Twin Tail, he'd be cast in the lead role of Twin Tail. In First Love Monster, he'd be casting the voice of the principal. In Puzzle and Dragons X, he'd be casting the voice of Yamaki. In Servamp, he'd be casting the voice of Higan. In Planetarian, he would be casting the English voice of Older Junker. In Izetta, the Last Witch, he would be casting the voice of Benoit. In Yuri on Ice, he'd be casting the voice of Koila Peletsky. In Joker Game, he'd be casting the voice of Sao Tomura. He would reprise his roles as Old Supreme Kai and Janemba in Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 video game. In Drifters, he would be casting the voice of the Sundance Kid. In Overlord, he would be casting the voice of Pluton Einzach. In Chaos Dragon, he would be casting as the voice of Kurama. In Aquarian Logos, he would be casting the voice of Yuji. In Alderman on the Sky, he would be cast the English voice of Emperor Alsan Kurt Kitra Kajivan Mani Maninik. In Rampo Kitan Game of Laplace, he would be casting the voice of Ryochiro Munakata. In Dragon Ball Super, he would reprise his roles as the three Kais, the Kabuto Kai, Ultimate Kai, and Supreme Kai. In Saga of Tanya the Evil, he would be cast as the English voice of Severin Bientot. He would then he would provide his role as the English voice of the vice principal in Interviews with Monster Girls in 2017. As we're now into 2017, um, let's see. In Chain Chronicle, The Light of Hacertes, he would be cast the English voice of Gilbert. In The Royal Tutor, he would be casting the voice of Dimitri. In Sukigaki Rei, he would be casting the voice of Ryonosuke Azumi. In Goshick, he would provide the English voice of Jupiter Roger. In Genocidal Oregon, he would provide the English voice of the Defense Minister of Georgia. In Star Blazer Space Battleship 2199 in the 2017 dub, he would provide the English voice of Osamu Yamami, and he would reprise his role as a Deus Ex Machina in the Future Diary Redial dub in 2017. In the Moros Monokian, he would provide the English voice of Nobuo. In Pop Team Epic, in one of the episodes, he would provide the English voice of Pipini. As I recall, Pop Team Epic was an anime in which the majority of the episodes were short, and they would switch voice actors around. So you had several people play several of the same character. So they would almost rotate around in a way. In Ace Attorney, of course, he would provide the English voice of the judge. In Dragon Ball Fighters, he would provide the English voices of two of the Kai, Supreme Kai, Old Supreme Kai, as well as Jamemba. In Darling in the Franxx, excuse me, he'd provide the English voice of Dr. Franxx. This can get tiring after a while when you're having to read through all these credits. He would reprise his role as Yoshitoki Washu in Tokyo Ghoul Regard. And in Hina Matsuri in 2018, he would provide the English voice of Shige. In the Dragon Ball Legends video game, he would reprise his roles, of course, as Mercenary Tao, Dr. Gero, Android 20, and Jamemba. In Gero Divine Flame, he would reprise his role as the English voice of Chamberlain. And he would also reprise his role as the older Junker in Planetarian Starteller. He would reprise his role as Toto in Free Timeless Medley The Bond. That was a free movie. In the anime That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, he would be cast as the English voice of Regurd. He would reprise his role as the English voice of the judge in Ace Attorney Season 2. In the 2019 remake of Fruits Basket, he was once again cast the English voice of Hattori Soma. He was the principal in 2019 now. He was the principal. He was the English voice of the principal in Kono Oto Tomare Sounds of Life. In Dr. Stone, he would be casting as the voice of Byakuya. In One Piece episode of East Blue, Luffy and his four friends, Great Adventure, he would reprise the role as Kuro Klahadore. He would then reprise the role as Shura in One Piece episode of Skypiea. Almost done, everybody. In the Dragon Ball Z Kakarot video game, he would more or less reprise the majority of his roles again as the Kais, Supreme, Kibito, and Old Supreme, Dr. Gero, and Mercenary Town. In Galaxy Rangers 999 external fantasy movie, he'd be cast as English voice of the conductor. In Thermae Romae, he would in 2020 here in Thermae Romae, he'd be cast English voices of Old Man at the Public Bath and the Polydorus. He would reprise his role as Mr. Compass as the English voice of Mr. Compass in the My Hero One's Justice 2 video game. And then he would be cast as the English voice of Vince Ingrando in City Hunter Shinjuku Private Eyes. So there you go. Those are all the roles that Kent Williams has done over the last 20 plus years as a voice actor. So all right, so now that you guys know more about Kent Williams' work, if you've liked him, there are shows there that maybe you haven't seen before that you want to go check out. Check out more of his work. You now can. Um, Also, if you guys want to contact me directly, um, you can basically message me on Discord. Also, I'm still promoting a bunch of different dub companies. Because fundamentally, even though I still do some of the voice actors from Funimation, because they're not all bad. It's only like a small little cadre of them who are really real nasty people. A lot of them, I'm sure, are pretty, are decent people. So, but there's more works out there. I'm still promoting a bunch of different dub companies. Also, um, I'm still promoting, of course, Vic's GoFundMe as well as Tug's project. If you guys want to, as always, guys, never feel like you have to donate. If it's on your heart to do so, and you have the means to, please consider donating. If you've already donated, please consider donating again. And if you cannot donate, you can still help out the cause by sharing the link. And sharing is caring. You never know. Maybe somebody in your circle of friends will want to help out. And if you guys like this content, please consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. I always look forward to the conversation with you guys, as long as, of course, civil and respectful. Also, guys, don't forget, I'm live streaming now 5 nights a week, Monday through Friday. So don't forget to check those out. It's a nightly news report on niche topics, including anime, manga, cartoons, comics, for wrestling, and a very special treat this Friday. I have the Knuckleheads coming on for an interview, so you guys might want to check that out. So, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy this, and I will see you next time. Bye.